All right, so this app today is called Budget Analysis. We are to create a program that helps a person determine their monthly budget. And the purpose is practicing decision structures using loops and if-else statements. All right, and this is from chapter number 4 as well, and programming challenge number 16. So I'll play it for you first so you can see what it looks like. All right, what is your monthly budget? It's asking the user. So I'll just say $1,000 is the monthly budget, okay? Enter your housing expenses. So let's say a user had $500 worth of rent, and let's say they had a $200 car note. Let's say they had $200 a month for groceries, and it asked them, do they have any additional expenses, which they could say yes or no. I'll say yes, and I'll just say they have $100 a month for utilities. Okay, and it'll ask again. It'll keep asking actually, but I'll say no, and this means that they are on budget. So their total expenses were $1,000. Their budget was $1,000. They don't have any more money to spend, and they don't have any more money to save. Okay, so let's say if they were under budget, so let's say they still had $1,000 for the month. And let's say their rent was $100, the car was $100, groceries $100, let's say something was $50, and let's say something else was $10. I don't know. So I'll say no more expenses. And it says that you are under budget by $640, and total monthly expenses $360. I noticed that I don't have a second decimal here. I probably could have used the decimal format. I'll probably add that in as well, but that is one way to do it. Import the decimal format and then call that on your displayed numbers so that they'll show the way how you want them to show. And then there is another option if you are over budget. So what is your monthly budget? I'll say $1,000. Let's say your housing is $500, a $500 car, $300 groceries, and I'll just say no. You are over budget by $300. Your total monthly expenses is $1,300. Okay? So that is analyzing their budget, and I'll show you my code here. And this was actually the first program I've ever done that I did not create a separate class for. I personally like things to look a little bit more organized, but I did want to kind of try it all in one since the book always shows it all in one as far as the chapter that I'm in right now. So that's what I did, and it actually wasn't too bad. It's not too bad. It could be cleaned up a little bit, but it's pretty simple to read. But starting from the top here, I have the variables as always. I always put my variables up here at the top, using mostly doubles, but I am using an int for more expenses, and that is basically out of that loop that I'll show you in a moment. And going down here, these 3 lines, 1, 2, 3, is basically just asking them the questions about their budget and housing and car expenses. I didn't really have to add in these 2 lines for housing and car. I could have just made it as, do you have any additional expenses? But I kind of just wanted to make the app a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it, but I just added those 2 in. And it's taking the total expense variable, taking that initialized 0, plus whatever they entered for their house expense, whatever they entered for their car expense, and they're putting that into the new total expense, which we pull down here into the while loop. And this comes into play where I had that more expenses equals 0, more expenses, because in this while loop, it's basically kind of doing like a data validation. And in order to validate that they said yes, with that yes option in the J option pane being basically an integer of 0, we have to check like, hey, this is a 0, not a no such as a 1. So that's why I initialized that up here as a 0 so that I could check down here, if that makes sense. So then it's just asking them for extra expenses, and it's converting those extra expenses just like we did up here, doing the parse doubles. Okay. And then it's taking that total expense. So it's taking the total expense from up here where it took in that car and the house. And then it's adding in the extra expense down here, creating a new total expense. And I did put a note here for myself. As always, I always put in notes that I originally had a logic error here. I placed all expense variables here at first, and if the user entered yes to loop, the program added additional housing and car expenses. I moved that calculation outside of the loop to prevent duplicates in my calculation. So initially, I put my car and housing, basically these two lines, well, 4 technically, right here, I had those in my while loop. But anytime that it asked this line down here, do you have any additional expenses? And if they said yes, and it basically looped again, so while this is yes, and it looped for the second time, it added in that initial car and housing expense. So I was a little puzzled by that for a few minutes, but eventually I sat to, just walked away and thought about it and was like, it's because I have those two in there, that it's adding and it's just re-looping it all together. So I took those out and put those outside just like I have the monthly budget. Okay, and then down here we do some if statements, basically so that the program or application can decide if the user is either under budget, over budget, or on budget. Okay, so if the total expense is less than the budget that they inputted, if it's less than that 1,000 we entered, then it would say, hey, you are under budget. If that total expense is greater than that $1,000 that we inputted, then it'll say you are over budget. Okay, and if it basically equals, but I said else, so if it's not less than and it's not greater than, basically it equals, else you are on budget, and then it will exit the program. So I'll show it to you once again, and I'm just going to make up some numbers just to see what it comes out to. So let's say our monthly budget is 1,000. I'll just use 1,000 again. Housing, I'll say your housing is 500. Car is 450. Extra expense is 30. Do you have an additional expense of 10? Do you have an additional expense? I'll say 80. Okay, and I'll say no more expenses. You are over budget by $70. Total monthly expenses is $1,070. In a way how you can format this to look like a comma or whatever, you can use the decimal format. So that's it for this program. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. But I do hope you have a great day.